So now over to our second session for today, family support and the relationship between work and family. And I will hand over to the capable hands of Professor Ola from the Stockholm University. Thank you, Professor.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm really feel honored to moderate this session, the first afternoon session about family support and relationship between work and family. Next slide, please. So I was thinking that we should start with the demographic rationale of these issues, why we are here discussing both policies and work and family. So let us take first a look at these population pyramids, which show the recent population age structure for Korea and for Sweden, and what the near future will bring here, so just 25 years ahead. So what can we see on these? First of all, let me start with Sweden. We see a rather balanced age structure, and not much exciting is happening by 25 years ahead either. So we can kind of feel more relaxed. However, when it comes to South Korea, already the first picture is really exciting because it shows a very different shape of the age structure compared to Sweden. Notably, we have the most part of the population, sorry. So we see that the largest segment of the population is in the middle, and we also have, of course, in the higher ages, relatively many people, but what is concerning us that in the lower ages, so the children and the young adults, that is shrinking, that segment of the population. And this is confirmed when we look at 25 years ahead, because this is really a population pyramid that should cause concern for everyone. We see that those who will enter in the workforce and bear children, they are very few. So what we are discussing today here, that we need to have a balance between the working age population and, of course, for families, that they will be able to bear children, which is currently not the case in South Korea. In fact, what is interesting here when I look at this diagram is the low fertility hypothesis, a low fertility trap hypothesis, which so far has been a hypothesis. But this picture seems to confirm, it has been actually launched by some Austrian colleagues, Professor Wolfgang Lutz and his colleagues. And what he says, the reason when you have this low fertility trap, it means that people are having fewer and fewer children, is you have the negative population momentum. So we are getting fewer and fewer the women who will enter in reproductive ages. And since the children who are brought up during these decades, they are brought up in small families, they are most likely the only children, all their friends are only children. So the family they can imagine is a one-child family. And then we can see here the result. So this is something really concerning. The other part is, of course, what has been mentioned already, the economic issues that we also have to think of, that we have high consumption aspirations because we are used to a relatively rich lifestyle, and we realize that our income prospects are maybe not that bright anymore. So it also will bring us to have or opt for fewer children. Next slide, please. Yes. And now just to go back a little bit in time. So what caused this concerning demographic development, which, by the way, will also have implications, of course, for the economic competitiveness of the society, meaning that the aging societies are less competitive. So this is also an economic issue. When we look at here, I marked Sweden and Korea. We can see that Sweden already in the 70s had total fertility rates, average number of children per woman, below the so-called replacement level, 2.1 children per woman. But during the different decades, it's not much happening. So in fact, the total fertility rate, even though it's declining, but it's still reasonably high. The picture is very different when we look at Korea, because in the 70s, they had a very high fertility rate, but already by 1995, we see that the total fertility rate was below the replacement level. And now it's something that has never been heard of, at least in demography, that it's not even 1 child per woman on average. Remember, the replacement level is 2.1 children per woman on average. We are below 1 child per woman on average. Next slide, please. We used to say that when we have low fertility, it probably depends on a postponement of parenthood. And when we look at this picture, mean age of women at first birth, we see both for Sweden and in Korea that indeed women are in their early 30s when they have their first child. But it is not that much difference between the two countries. So how come that we have a huge difference in total fertility rates? Next slide, please. Well, now we bring in the equation, the work. And let us take a look at the correlation between female labor force participation and total fertility rates in OECD countries. And in 1980, the picture goes that it's a clear negative correlation. Those countries, we had relatively low female employment rates. They had high fertility, notably Korea. And countries which had already, at that time, high female employment rates, they had rather low level of birth rate, such as Sweden. But then, as we see on the other picture, something has happened, and now the correlation turned positive. So now countries which have a high percentage of women in the labor force do not necessarily have low fertility, in fact, rather the opposite. Whereas in countries where female labor force participation is still relatively limited, they are not likely to have high fertility. Rather, the opposite the case. Next slide, please. We should also look at not only female labor force participation, of course, but maternal employment rates. So how can mothers combine to be part of the labor force when they have young children? And here we see Sweden. And here we see Korea. So it's already obvious that it's very different, the labor force participation rates, even when we have very young children, age up to 2. In Sweden, the maternal employment rates is about 70%. In Korea is below 50%. And for children who are in school age, then, of course, Sweden has very high, nearly that high maternal employment rates as for men, whereas for Korea, even then for these school-age children is just around 60 or between 60 and 70%. So it's much more depressed. Next slide, please. And so now, before we ask our distinguished presenters to provide us with some details, so let us take a look at this. Last slide, which shows the public spending on family benefits in percentage of the GDP. And again, Sweden is the high end and Korea is at the low end of the OECD ranking. It means that in Korea, we have less than 2% of the GDP spent on families. And in Sweden, it's around 3.5%. And of course, as we can also see, that there are differences on what this public spending is spent. Is it on childcare? Is it cash provision? Or is it perhaps tax break for families? And we will learn more on that. So now I would like to invite the first speaker, Dr. Young-Suk Kim, Research Fellow at the Division of Gender Equality Research at the Korean Women's Development Institute. Dr. Kim received her PhD in economics at the University of Tsukuba, Japan. And her main areas of expertise is health and labor economics. Please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Young-Suk Kim. Today, I'll be talking about Korea's work-life balance budget through a gender lens. Korea's gender budgeting was introduced in the 2010 budget process. Since then, it has played a critical role in raising awareness of gender equality within a legal framework. So our institution, the KWDI, works closely with the Ministry of Economy and Finance as a leading organization in developing gender budgeting in Korea. I've been conducting research on gender budgeting since the early stages of its introduction. I have structured my presentation into 5 main sections. First, I will talk about why work-life balance policies matter and how they contribute to the economy. Then I'll walk you through an overview of the budget itself. And next, we will look at some of the tangible results that have come out of the budget. In the first section, I'll discuss the 2025 budget from a gender perspective. And finally, I'll wrap up with the policy implications and government budgets are always limited, so policies need to prove their unique values to secure funding. That's why we need to highlight the fact that work-life balance policies aren't just about social welfare, they are an economic necessity. As you can see in this slide, Korea is facing a serious demographic challenges. With a rapidly aging population and persistently low birth rates, our workforce is shrinking. It puts some pressure on the economy and public finance. However, increasing the female employment could be a key solution. If we can close the gender gap, we can boost GDP and soften the economic impact of an aging population. Looking at economic trends in Korea, female employment has increased steadily over the past 5 years, except for a brief dip in 2020 due to COVID-19. However, from 2019 to 2023, female employment rate has increased by 2.5 percentage points, whereas the male employment rate only rose by 0.6 percentage points. This shows that the gender gap in the labor workforce is shrinking, is narrowing, though there is still some work. This table shows the impact of labor on economic growth in Korea, broken by gender. Labor contributions declined in 2019 and 2020 due to the COVID-19. Female employment surged between 2021 and 2023, adding about 700,000 jobs compared to the 400,000 jobs for men. In 2023, labor input contributed 0.5 percentage point to the GDP growth, with women making up 60% of that contribution. It means 0.3 percentage points. The OECD's 2024 analysis highlights the massive economic potential of closing gender gaps in the workforce. If these gaps were addressed, OECD countries could see an 8.8% increase in GDP per capita by 2060. For Korea, this impact could be bigger, potentially boosting GDP by 8.9%. So in short, strengthening work-life balance policies is key to narrowing gender gaps in employment and working hours. But challenges still remain, especially when it comes to the unpaid household and caregiving work, which still falls mainly on women. To address this issue, many OECD countries have expanded parental leave policies, especially for fathers. So encouraging the division of parental leave between fathers and mothers. Now let's shift our focus to the budget itself. The Korea's work-life balance budget is categorized under public social expenditure, especially in family policies. Before dividing into the specifics, it's useful to compare Korea's public family in the expenditure with other countries. As of 2019, Korea spent 1.56% of GDP on public family policies, which is significantly lower than the OECD average and well below than countries with high birth rates, such as France, Germany, and Sweden. However, the budget has increased substantially from only 0.23% in 2001. Okay. The 2023 work-life balance budget was largely allocated to the maternity protection and childcare support program by the Ministry of Employment and Labor. This program helps working parents manage career and childcare responsibilities through employment insurance benefits, as explained by Dr. Kim later in this morning. So the benefits consist of maternity leave, parental leave, partial parental leave, and paternity leave. And by the way, the reason we are looking at the 2023 budget is that it's the most recent finalized data. Over the years, funding for this program has significantly grown. Back in 2019, the budget was 1.3 trillion won, but by 2023, it has jumped to 2.2 trillion, average annual increase of almost 14%. This growth has actually outpaced the overall rise in government spending, showing how important this budget has become. One major factor behind this budget increase is the expansion of parental leave policies in 2022. A key part of the expansion was the introduction of the 3+3 parental leave system. So it was explained in Dr. Kim's presentation. So I skip it. So how the budget, looking at how this budget was funded, the primary source is employment insurance fund, which receive contributions from both employers and employees. However, this fund has been running a persistent deficit due to rising expenditures, particularly on benefits related to this program. For 2024, 88% of the 2.5 trillion won budget came from the employment insurance fund, with the remaining portion covered by the government transfers from the general account. So securing a more sustainable funding mechanism remains a major challenge moving forward. So I will revisit this issue later in the Congress. So then, how can we tell if this budget is actually making a difference? So one way is to look at the real life outcomes. So let's go over some indicators that show this and its impact. One clear sign of the progress is the growing number of people taking parental leave. In 2022, around 200,000 individuals used parental leave, which is a 14.2% increase from 2021 and nearly 3 times the number in 2010. Another big shift is the rising participation among men. Back in 2010, only 2.7% of parental leave takers were men. But by 2022, that number had jumped to 27.1%. Another important measure is the number of parental leave takers per 100 births. In 2022, that number reached 35, rising up from just 15.2 in 2030. Okay. So one of the most encouraging trends we're looking at is that more men are taking parental leave. One reason for this could be the improvements in income replacement rates, thanks to policies like the 3+3 parental leave system. If you look at the table, you will see that between 2020 and 2023, the number of men taking parental leave has increased significantly at an annual rate of 9.9%, compared to just 2.7% for women. When we break it down by income level, then both men and women earning more than 2 million won per month are using parental leave more. We're also seeing more employees in SMEs taking parental leave. As Dr. Kim mentioned in the morning session, in the past, it was mostly employees in the large business that who used parental leave. One reason for this is that SMEs often struggle more when an employee goes on leave. Both the employer and co-workers have to cover the workload. And there is usually less infrastructure to support parental leave. But since 2022, the participation in SMEs, the smaller businesses, has been rising. So To close the gaps in parental leave use between men and women, as well as between small and large businesses more, the government is raising funding for work-life balance programs in 2025. Especially the budget for maternity protection and childcare support program is set to jump from 2.5 trillion won in 2024 to 4 trillion won in 2025. It's a big shift. So this really shows the government's strong commitment to improving work-life balance policies. Yeah. Now that we've seen the budget's impact, then let's take a closer look at the 2025 budget from a gender perspective. Gender budgeting system in Korea is based on the National Finance Act, which requires the government to evaluate how budget allocations impact different genders. The gender budgeting follows a structured process with two key documents at its core, as shown in the diagram. The first one is the gender budget statement. The GB statement is submitted every September with the following year's proposal to the National Assembly. And it includes gender equality goals by ministry and analyzes how budget allocations impact both men and women, and set the measurable performance objectives and explains the reasoning behind these objectives. Second is the gender budget execution report. This report is submitted every February to the Board of Audit and Inspection. This report assesses whether objectives in the GB statement were met and providing an analysis of previous year's outcomes. Also, expert performance evaluations are conducted on projects included in the GB execution report, and their feedback is used to refine the next year's budget proposal and GB document. This provides an overview of the GB documents for the maternity protection and childcare support program. As I mentioned earlier, this is the largest work-life balance practices in Korea. So it means what it has the largest budget. So as part of the government standardized performance management system, which applies to all budget programs, one key indicator to measure its effectiveness is the number of men taking parental leave. However, it changed. So, yeah. Yeah, it's right. So however, the GB statement tracks also another important measure, the employment retention rate after using 1 year after using the program. According to the 2023 GB execution report, this program successfully met its target for the number of male parental leave takers. However, it fell short when it came to the employment retention rate. So this shows that more men are taking parental leave, but the program's impact on keeping people in the workforce long term is still not strong. The 2025 GB statement has allocated a budget of 4 trillion won for this program. Since policies like maternity leave apply mainly to women, more than 70% of beneficiaries are female. However, with the expansion of the parental leave policies, the number of both men and women taking parental leave is increasing, even as birth rates decline. To improve the program, we conducted expert evaluation. So in the expert evaluation, the drop in the employment retention rate was flagged as a key concern. So according to the results, the ministry has committed itself to monitoring how the program is implemented and using the findings to inform future budget documents. Apart from the major program I mentioned earlier, the budget for other work-life balance initiatives is relatively small. One of the programs included in the GB execution report is the Family-Friendly Certification Initiative by the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. This program encourages businesses to adapt best practices for work-life balance policies. While this program is part of a higher level program, it isn't directly tied to key performance indicators in the government's overall management performance management system. But in the GB statement, the number of family-friendly certified enterprises and institutions is tracked as a key indicator. According to the 2023 GB execution report, this program successfully met its incremental targets, showing steady progress. For 2025, a budget of 2 billion won it has been allocated to continuously support this program. Since this program focuses on businesses and public institutions rather than individuals, gender-based beneficiary analysis hasn't been conducted. Instead, the ministry recognizes that this program played a key role in fostering a culture of work-family balance and has explicitly stated this in the GB statement. To continuously improve this program, according to the expert evaluation results, the ministry collaborates with SMEs, providing consulting and support both before and after certification to help them implement family-friendly policy. Moving forward, I suggest discussing two key issues. First, we need a more sustainable way to fund work-life balance policies. Right now, most of the funding comes from the employment insurance fund, which means the financial burden falls mainly on businesses and employees. So since the work-life balances are national priority, we should be looking at alternative funding mechanisms. So one option currently being discussed is setting up a special demographic account to help diversify funding particularly through general taxation. Second, Korea's gender budgeting needs a more results-driven approach. At present, only programs explicitly tagged as gender-related are required to submit a GB statement. While the Ministry of Economy and Finance provides guidance, but each ministry is ultimately responsible for its own GB statement. So to enhance accountability, all budget programs aligned with broader gender equality goals, like a work-life balance, should be included in the GB statement. So that concludes my presentation. So thank you all for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite our other distinguished speakers, Mr. Niklas Löfgren, Senior Analyst and Spokesperson for Family Economic Policy at the Swedish Social Insurance Agency. Mr. Löfgren has a degree in political science from Stockholm University, and of course, long-standing experience at the Swedish Social Insurance Agency. He's also a member of the management team of the Children and Family Department and Senior Analyst for Children and Family Affairs. Please.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Niklas Löfgren, as you said, and I come from this authority that's an authority under the government, and we administrate the cash transfers of the social insurance, so to speak. We can go on to the next slide, I think. I named this presentation Makes Family Work, because that's what it's all about when we work with social insurances for families and children, benefits and so on, to help them facilitate their life puzzles, so to speak, each family. As I started to say, we're an authority under the government. We administrate the social insurance, the cash transfers in case of illness, disability, and for families with children. We have a system in Sweden, I would say, with high level of transfers. So we have high taxes, but also have high benefits and insurances. So you pay a lot, but you get a lot back from the system, I would say. So therefore, you see, we pay out 260 billion Swedish kronor per year. That's approximately, I would say, between 20-25% of the total state budget that we pay out from our authorities. So it's a lot. We're located in 60 different locations in Sweden, but the head office is here in Stockholm. And since there are a lot of transfers, there are also a lot of case handling. So therefore, we have 14,100 people working in the authority. So it's a big authority. You can take this. We're a part of this. You can take all of this. We're a part of what the government would call an economic family policy, where we come in as one part of that puzzle, of that policy. And the idea with the system is that it should be possible for all parents, both men and women, to combine working life with family life. Shouldn't have to choose whether to have a family or a job. Everyone should be able to do both at the same time. It's also that one principle is that we should redistribute money from families without children to families with children. Many times also in life, from times in life yourself, when you don't have a child, you will pay for the system and you will get some back when you have a child. because we know we need more children to be born, and we also know that they cost money. So therefore, we need to have a system that transfers money also. And the idea is also that this system should give support in vulnerable situations. And that could be financial vulnerability, or it could also be if you have a child, a disabled child, or something else. This system should also help you as a family. So it should give you some kind of standard protection, but also basic support also in different situations. And what the government hopes to get back from this investment, so to speak, is high labor force participation among both men and women, and also high fertility rates. So therefore, they have filled this policy with the content where the schools, preschools, daycare services, and so on is one important part. So therefore, it's highly subsidized also by taxes, daycare centers, preschools, and so on. So parents who have their children there, they will only have to pay about 10% of the actual cost that it costs to have daycare centers. So this is important, but it's administrated by the municipalities. Then we have the parental insurance that we administrate, and what it consists of, I will show you later on. We also have general and means-tested benefits. So that's the main idea of the whole system, of the family policy system. We can go on, I think. And this is our products, our benefits, and our insurances that we administrate at the Social Insurance Agency then. And I will walk you through them. There are three big benefits. One is child allowance, and that is that you get money just for having a child. So in Sweden today, you will get 125 euros every month just for having a child. And that's what an old allowance. We've been developing these systems, I would say, for about 100 years or so. And this child allowance was introduced in 1948 for the first time. And back then, it was only paid out to mothers, actually, because fathers were not trusted with this money. Because when they talked about child allowance back then, they said that it's important that it's paid out to women, because if we pay this to men, the money will not reach the children. So the idea back then was actually to increase fertility and more children to be born, but also to reduce poverty among families with children. We have the next benefit called housing allowance, also an old allowance from 1937, actually. The idea with that allowance today, and back then also, I would say, is to make it possible for mainly poor families to be able to have better living conditions. The idea back then was that every child should have their own room and so on. They should be able to ask for better living conditions, but also to reduce poverty among families with children. And I would say not many people actually know this in Sweden as well. In this benefit, there is also a means-tested child allowance hidden in this, because if you have a housing allowance, which is means-tested, you will also get 150 euros every month just for having a child, and it's only for those with low economy. So it's a hidden means-tested child allowance within this allowance, I would say. So it's very important, mostly for single mothers with 2 or more children. I would say it means a lot for them. And then we also have maintenance support, and that is for separated parents. The main idea is that the parent who doesn't live with the child should pay directly to the other parent. But if he or she fails to do so, then we pay out maintenance in advance and claim it from the other parent later on, so that the child or the person living with the child should not suffer because the other parent fails to pay. So we pay this in advance. So these are the main benefits, I said. On top of that, we have also benefits for if you have a disabled child that needs more care or more attention. You can also get a benefit for that. And if that child also have more costs due to the disability, you can also get some money from that. So it should support in vulnerable situations also. The insurances, well, it's a little bit funny that the insurances are called benefits and not insurances. But the first one, it's called pregnancy benefit, and that is for pregnant women who has risks or heavy lifts or some kind of danger in their working environment that could be harmful for the child to be or the pregnant woman herself. You can get actually for the last 2 months of the pregnancy, you can get 80% of your salary, and you don't have to work. If your employer cannot give you other working tasks, they have to look into that first. Then, if they can't, you apply for pregnancy benefit to the Social Insurance Agency, and we pay it out. And I would say about 25% of all pregnant women in Sweden gets pregnancy benefit. So it's a good benefit, I think. And then to the big one, parental benefit or yeah, you get that when the child is born. In Sweden, you get actually 480 days of parental benefit when the child is born. And this was introduced in 1974. So actually, this benefit turns 50 years old this year, so it's been around for a while. And from the start, I would say the idea was that men and women should share this equally. The core idea was that 50% was thought of for the men and 50% for women. But from the start, men didn't want to use this at all, so they just transferred all the days to the mothers instead. So the first year, actually, it was only 0.5% of all days that were paid out to men, and 99.5% to women. So men didn't really want to use this. It has developed over time of this 50 years. The first year you got 180 days in total, so 6 months was the first that we introduced in 1974. It was actually also the world's first parental benefit that was aimed at both parents equally. Yeah, the core idea has been the same, I would say, since 1974. But it didn't really work from the beginning, because I mean it was only women who were home, and men they didn't use it. So from 74 up till 1995, not much happened actually. It was a 90-10 split after 10 years. Oh, after 20 years. So 1994, 90% were still paid out to women and only 10% to men. So therefore, they invented the first reserved month. 30 days you can no longer transfer to the other parent in 1995. Use it or lose it. If you don't use it, the state will take the days back. And it had a great effect from the start, immediately from the first year. Most men, I would say, started to take exactly 30 days. Not 29, not 31, but 30. So it was very important. So you should have my days, but more or less. So therefore, since it worked, in 2002, we introduced a second month. 60 days could no longer be transferred. And it had a similar effect, not as strong as the first one, but a similar effect actually in 2002. And also, most men started to use exactly 60 days, and not 59 or 61. They could do that, but no, exactly 60. So that was interesting. Well, since that worked also, we had this third month now in 2016. And I think they could have been more brave, because men in 2016, in average, they used more than 3 months, but still they set the limit on 3 months. It had some effect, but not as much as the second month or the first month, I would say. And today, I would say fathers use till the child is 8 years old, about 120 days with parental benefit. So from nothing at all in 74 to 50 years later, 120 days. Well, it goes towards a more equal usage anyway, but maybe a little slow. There are some, you can use this in many ways, parental benefit. You can use half days if you want to, half days each. You can use 3 months now actually at the same time if you want to, so-called double days. You can, there are a lot. You can use in small pieces also. You can reduce your working hours with 1 hour or 2 hours a day if you want to, and use parental benefit for the rest of the day. And you have the leaving rights by law in the parental leave law. So the employer cannot say no. If you want to reduce your working hours to 6 hours a day and be home for 2 hours, you just tell your employer that. You don't have to ask for permission. They cannot say no. Maybe you will have more questions about parental benefit later out, and I can answer them if you have more. You get, in general, you get 80% of your salary, and you get up to a certain ceiling. So on top of that ceiling, you're not covered at up to 80%. And there is a trend, I would say, in Sweden today that most companies, they have done agreements with the employers. So they pay extra on top of that income ceiling. So I, who work for the government, I have such an agreement. So even though the ceiling is 80% of my salary up to a certain salary level, I have 90% for me, and I have no ceiling because my employer pays the rest. And that is very common in Sweden today, that you have those kinds of agreements. The last insurance is called temporary parental benefit, and you have that in different situations. One is that when a child, when the mother is at a hospital and giving birth to a child, it enables another person to be at the hospital or help at the same time. So for 10 days, you're allowed to stay at home in connection with childbirth and still get 80% of your salary. And also you get the leaving rights by law then for 10 days. But the most common usage of this is when a child is sick, because from the child is 8 months old until the child is 12 years old, you're allowed to stay at home from work if the child is sick. And you as a parent, you decide yourself if a child is sick up till the 8th day. So after day 7, you need to have a doctor certificate to show that the child is sick, so for the employer. But most people, when they're home with a sick child, I would say that they're home between 2 or 5 days or so. That's the normal usage, I would say. And in general, you use, for a child in preschool ages, you use about 10 days in average per child a year. But you're entitled actually to 120 days per child a year, but as most children don't need that, and that's very generous, I would say. But maybe some do. If you have a severe illness of some kind, maybe some do, but not many. We also have an unlimited number of days also if there is a seriously ill child that may die in the nearest future or so. Then both parents can stay home at the same time and also attend the child at home or in the hospital and so on. So you need a doctor certificate for that, but then there is no limit of number of days. The child either gets better or dies, you know. So that's the limits for that, I guess. Yeah, so that's a little bit about this insurance. I think we can take the next slide. Does the system policy work then? Well, as many have shown here before, we have high labor force participation. We have a small gender gap. The employment rate is also high with a small gender gap, I would say. We show that the fertility rates earlier also. There we see a decline actually in fertility rates for the last 2 years or so, I would say. So now it's the lowest number of births in 20 years, actually. Well, the number of births previous went up every year. So, we see anyway a trend there with declining fertility rates the last 2-3 years or so. But then again, I would say in Sweden, the fertility rates are often associated with our generous system that also aims at gender equality, but it also differs depending on how the economy goes. When times are good, we see a little bit after fertility rates and birth rates going up. When times are bad, we see the opposite. Still, we see some, not everything is good, I would say. We see some challenges still because we haven't made it all the way to equal usage of parental insurance. Therefore, we see when the first child is born, we see that there is an income gap and health gap developing soon after the first child is born between men and women. And that gap because it keeps on for, I've seen research that showed the gap 10 years after actually. And we see that the gap was not existent before the first child was born. So that is a challenge to try to lower these gaps, because the health gap is almost twice, the risk of getting sick is almost twice as high for women after the first child is born than it is for men. And that could also be a risk then for discrimination when it comes to getting a job and promotion and so on. If they think that, oh, you're a woman, you're going to be sick or so. So that is one thing to actually try to reduce. So we say also a part-time gap, even though women and men are on the labor market, we see that women more works part-time than men. And all these things put together, if you're home longer with parental insurance, you work part-time more, you're sick more, you have a lower income over time, there will be also, as we see, a pension gap in the end. So therefore, these are questions that need to be addressed. I think we can go on and see if we have some more. We don't have then we miss a slide because we need to also tell you about how our system is financed. The system is financed when it comes to the benefits, it's financed through taxes, mainly through taxes. And when it comes to the insurances, it's actually paid by fees that the employer pays, like social fees and employers' fees. So on top of every gross salary in Sweden, you pay over 31% extra in these employers' fees. And they go to finance these insurances. So to be able to pay for the parental insurance, 2.6% of these 31 are paid to just finance the parental insurance. So I think that is a sustainable method of financing the system, because then you pay according to how much you earn in incomes. You pay a percentage, and then you get money back according to your income, but only up to a ceiling, and that ceiling is only indexed towards prices. So therefore, you see, when income's increasing faster, then prices, you will pay more than you get back in that manner. Also, everyone pays for the system, but not all get back. So that's also one way to make this sustainable. I think that was all that I will say right now.
Thank you very much for very interesting, informative presentations. And now I would like to open up the floor for questions or comments.
Okay, I don't like to get involved in this about the taxes are sustainable, or not, depending on where you sit, of course, and from what position. But I have a question for you, Nicholas, or maybe it's more or less of a comment. On one of the slides, you mentioned some of the challenges with our system. And I've been an employer for about 25 years. And one of the challenges for me as an employer is that the balance between the benefits on behalf of parents with the parental leave system and what's on my side in order to satisfy the objectives of the company, in this case, the armed forces, because there's no difference between the armed forces and the private sector. I just give you one example. You mentioned that we have a very, very more or less extreme flexibility in the way you can, and a lot of parents are very smart. So when we do our planning for vacation in Sweden, we have a law for vacation and we have a law for parental leave. The law for parental leave is much stronger. So the smart parents, they take 50%, a half day, and make it more or less impossible for me to plan them on their vacation, because I can decide when you take vacation, like I cannot decide when you take parental leave. So I am stuck with having a lot of unhappy workers that do not have children, that have to work on the middle of the best holiday seasons in Sweden, because that's where all the employers with children take the parental leave, which overrules the vacation law. So it's a very beneficial system, and I think in certain areas it has reached its limit and even become unsustainable, because some of the negative effects of the system is impacting so much on companies, both private and public companies, and especially when people kind of misuse the system, because you can see it's so clear when you look at the applications for parental leave and applications for vacation. So that was a comment. And maybe a question for you, Dr. Kim. You mentioned this about the need to introduce performance-oriented budgeting system, gender budgeting system. But how difficult would it be? Because some of the effects we see from work-life balance is not about money and rules, it's more of behavior and culture. So how do you kind of make sure that you measure kind of the right effects and not effects of societal changes in general?
Oh, you can take that.
Yeah. Okay. Before answering to your question, let me explain about our gender budgeting system. Actually, gender budgeting system was introduced as part of performance management system, but gender budgeting system is not belong to the government standardized performance management system. So in the case of the government system, the public officer should submit a performance plan before submitting budget proposal. And after finalizing the program, they have to submit some performance reports where they have to prove what kind of performance they got. Yeah. So the results of performance report directly impact the amount of budget for the following years, for the following fiscal year. But in the case of GB statement, it even though it is submitted to the National Assembly, it's just a next document. So it means even if the GB statement has its own performance indicator and the performance report, but it doesn't have an impact on the budget, the amount of budget for the following year. So, I mean, so the incentive of the GB statement for performance management system is too big. So I mean what I mean that the gender budgeting need more resource-driven approach is that we should need a more strong incentive to impact the budget itself.
Would you like to?
Yeah, I could reply also. I think that is one common criticism of the system from companies, I would say, just like you said. I think that maybe it's a political question, but the law is that you are entitled, just as you say, but you're only entitled to make 3 planning periods each year, so not more. And you'll also have to tell your employer in advance at least 3 months ahead. So you have to give good time for notice and also not have many different planning periods. So that is one thing that you cannot just decide 1 week before or so. But I know the time between Christmas and New Year and in July, parents are home. So yeah, that's a problem. Yes. Yeah, true.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
So thank you for all 3 presentations. They're all interesting and they're kind of speak to each other. I have one question for you, Niklas, about this, the right for leave when your child is ill. I am from Denmark, and in Denmark, you have through the collective bargaining, you have this right to, and it's different per sector. And you have certain number of days where you're allowed to stay home until your child is X years old. But only those days. So you have, like, for example, I'm also publicly employed in university, so I have something like, so my child is 8, 5 days free with payment. So my question to you is, it sounds like a lot, this many days. So is it with payment, and is there? It's with full payment?
Yeah, it's with full
Wow.
payment, yes.
That's
And you get
amazing.
new days each year, so it's not like you
No,
have,
it's new days each year until the child is what?
yeah, until the child is 12 years old, and per child.
Much more generous.
So, yes, it's a lot, yes. We also have problems with fraud cases and that we work hard with.
Yeah.
So approximately 1 billion Swedish kronor is
Yes.
paid out wrongfully each year, only within this insurance. So that's a challenge actually to try to reduce this a lot.
Okay.
But we have actually got, just now, we got a new, we call a new tool for checkups. And that is that employers in Sweden today, they need to go to the tax authority and tell the tax authority each month how much money they paid out for a certain employee, how much tax they paid in, and also the dates when the person was away from work for taking care of a child, so that we can make checkups and check with those dates later on then. So that will give us much better working tools to deal with this issue. But it's a lot of money that has been paid out wrongfully, I would say.
And I have one question for you.
Okay.
Is there a similar policy in Korea when your child is ill? Who takes care of the child? Do you have the right to stay at home and have a wage, full wage or partial wage when your child is ill?
I don't think we have, but to be sure, I'd like to ask question to our prisoner, Doctor. I think.
Oh.
She's gone? No?
What did you ask, Dr. Kim?
I
Would you say that again, please?
There is a child benefit or a benefit for parents who have to stay home with a sick child. So if your child, one is it possible in South Korea to stay home when your child is ill as a parent? And if so, is there a number of days and is there a level of compensation for that?
Well, actually, I'm not quite sure it's paid or not, but we have unpaid family leave program.
Okay.
It's for people, if it's for employees who have sick child or any kinds of care problems. So we do not, I don't think we pay for that kind of leave right now, but we have pretty much we have very many kinds of allowance programs. For example, we have child allowance program until they have until they are 8 years or 10 years. It's quite generous program. I'm not quite sure exact the age of children, but we have pretty generous child allowance. And then
could you specify, so this child allowance program, is there like an eligibility criteria in terms of, is it just like a family benefit for until the children?
yes.
Or so
It's
it's not
kind of family benefit, but it's not kind of well, it's pretty much allowance program. If we have children, their parents get paid. It's a huge money. It's per month it's about 100만 won. It's in dollar base. It's more than $700 per month. That's pretty generous. And then
So,
we have,
let me put it a little bit differently. So if a child gets sick.
well, we don't have that. We don't have sick child care benefits.
What do the parents do?
Well, if then mostly parents can have leave program for
Take day off.
Take days off.
Oh, yeah. If you pay. Yes, okay. Okay, thank you. That was one question there, yeah?
Yeah, it's just as Deborah talked about before, that in Scandinavia, we try to go to take care of disabled children and children with diagnoses. So what do you do in Korea? Do you have special programs for families with children that is disabled or have a diagnosis? And what kind of things might there be in Korea to help these families so that parents can have a better work-life balance? Because a disabled child will of course be more time consuming, but also be more costly to have.
Okay, I'm not sure, but Maybe it's a kind of the same, pretty much same question. As the previous question, right?
So like, the first one I think was more like when your child is sick, so like they come down with a flu comfy. So like a normal flu, they would have to stay at home.
Mhm.
But if you're disabled or like say you have a diagnosis, if you're severe autistic or have ADHD or other special needs, do you have special programs for families to give them extra money or extra other options to help these families provide for the children with special needs?
I'm not sure, but I don't think we.
So it's just like children with special needs in South Korea is overall just covered like every other children per se then.
Yeah, or by some social insurance.
Okay, but that's self-paid insurance maybe or governmental insurance?
It's social insurance fund based.
Okay, thank you. Is there a question? Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. I have one question for each of you. I wondering about you talking about the health gap. I cannot quite understand why women get ill more from the children and the fathers. I mean, that's because it would be one thing if you suspected that women would be home and call in sick because they needed to be with a sick child, but that's not necessary. So is there any explanations to that? And then the other one for South Korea is, I don't know, you might have touched upon it or I might be totally out on this one, but for me, I cannot quite link the notion of a traditional society where traditions are important, which also then impact on gender equality, etc. And your incredibly low fertility. You know, I would have thought that in a way, traditional needs children. You know, so how, and I see that some of you benefit, I mean, the country you are obviously thinking of it, but still, it hasn't improved fertility rate. So what do politicians say about this? I mean, how are they fighting it? Thank you.
Yes, about the sick rates. It is, it's measured by the number of sick days per woman and per man. So it's not sickness days that you're home with a sick child. And there is no like proven explanation like that. I think, but it's associated to that women double work more than men. They take more responsibility at home and still try to work full time at the labor market, and that costs a lot. We see some research in one report actually that these that reform with the double days, that you can use parental benefit days at the same time. One report showed that that was positive for women's health. It reduced the number of sick days, also reduced the number of medicine and intake in hospital when they use these double days early after the child is born. But it's not really my field, so I'm not I can't explain it in detail, actually, I would say.
Okay, in my opinion, it is a big problem. And also, decades ago, we proposed that the low birth rates would be very big issues for the long-term economic growth. But at the time, and anyone wasn't able to hear the voice because at the time low birth rates are not that was not accepted as a key concern. But these days, the shocking birth rates directs our attention. So as I mentioned before, the big budget increase is, I think, the big progress of the concern, because other budget programs, the amount of other budget programs has been decreased because our government is trying to reduce our government expenditure. But among the trends, we can increase the budget for work-life balances. I think that's a very good start point for moving forward.
Thank you. Sunny,
Yeah,
you would like to?
thank you for both your presentations. It was really interesting to listen to. I kept thinking about the fact that parenting culture has really changed in recent years. So it's much more intense in terms of the amount of time and energy and financial resources that it takes. And I think we're really used to thinking about work as being a greedy institution, but I think more and more we also have family being a greedy institution, to put it one way. And I have a research project on this where I'm looking at different ways in which it matters. And for example, one of the studies that we have is that showing that women who have intensive parenting attitudes are much more likely to be sick than mothers who are not sharing those attitudes. Whereas we find the exact opposite for men. So men are getting this health boost from being intensive parents with their children, but it's draining for women. So that's just one finding that we have. But I would love to hear from you if you think that this shift in parenting culture is playing out in any of the trends you see in your social insurance benefits. And then from you in Korea, if you see any evidence of intensive parenting arising there.
Hard to say if I see any trends like that. I see a change in attitudes and norms in society that has changed over time. If you go back to the 70s, a father could say, I won't be home with my kids. I'm not interested in that. And that would be okay in the early 70s. Today, if some father would say that in Sweden, he would be considered stupid or something. So that would not be accepted, not socially accepted in Sweden today. So it has been a big shift in norm and also attitudes at the working places and so on. I think today companies compete over being family-friendly companies, and here's the best place to work if you're a parent and so on. So it has been a shift in society. So, but you're talking this intense parenting, I'm not sure actually. I don't know.
Okay, for Korea, I think I think the problem is the high education fee rather than intense education. So I think we should spend a lot of money for private education. So and as he said, for Korea, but the social loan is very important, and I think the change of the social loan can't catch up with the pace that the economy developed. Economy is developing. So I think, I don't know. I'm curious how to change the social loan or some reduce the high education fee or some cost. But yeah, I think it's a major change moving forward.
Thank you. There was a question here.
Yeah, just my name is Johanna. I'm a former intern at the Korea Center. I wanted to ask about the Yoon's party. Like, since the election, has the development of the sort of policies taken? Have they slowed down or have they continued kind of benefiting women? Because I've seen that obviously he's more conservative than the previous government. I was just wondering if there has been any noticeable change in the policies regarding family, etc., since he was elected.
Okay. Regarding work-life balances, as I mentioned before, the budget has increased. So I think it doesn't depend on the political things because the work-life balance policies are a national priority, and I think we agree on some social consensus around the kind of.
Yes, Edric?
So thank you for your presentations. I've got a question for Mr. Lundgren. Pardon my Swedish pronunciation. In that regard, the insurance that you provide is in Sweden, particularly the parental benefit and the child allowance. So my first question is, how do you check whether they're spent for children actually? Maybe money are spent in medicine and entertainment, that's easier, but how about time of the parents, if there is a mechanism or not? And second, as Major General already introduced the concerns of the entrepreneurs, I was about to ask how the society received the extension of the parental benefits. So you were saying males were not so willing to take these days, those days that they had. So were they happy indeed, or families were happier? Did they have more free time, or was it a waste of time for their jobs? And also then I have a further question to ask. That worked for employees indeed. How about people that, I don't know how to refer to them in English, but people who work for themselves, let's say, yeah, self-employed people, how do they get a leave? Thank you.
Yes, many questions. I will see if I remember all. But how we do checkups when it comes to child allowance? We do not. You get the money and you're allowed to spend them as you wish. There has been ideas about should there be a child account that we can see that this money is spent for the child and so on, but it has never been a popular solution, I would say. So today you're allowed, it should go to the child's upbringing and for the cost of the child, but there are never any checkups that you use it for that in practice, I would say. When it comes to parental insurance, how do we check that the parent actually are with the child and not playing golf or something? We do checkups with the employer, and they tell us if they were at work or not. But we do not go into people's homes and look for ourselves, or so we don't. So that's, but of course, if we get an impulse from someone saying that he's on parental leave, but he left for Hawaii last week or so, we do checkups then and see if that's true or not, or try to investigate anyway. So that was that part.
Then was how the society received these.
I would say it was like politicians who were brave, I would say, that introduced these systems, because it wasn't that popular among men, because they didn't want to be home actually from the start. There were no men out on the streets demonstrating that we want parental insurance or so. That didn't happen. It was women and politicians, I would say, who did that. So that pushed the development. They dared to do it, even so that they might lose votes actually over these suggestions. But I would say there were some, when the first reserved month came and the second, and also there were some protests, some like people saying in the debates that this is not good, you should be able to choose for yourself and you should not. But after a while, this is forgot. It wasn't that big of an issue anyway, so people got used to it, I would say. And the part of how self-employed does. Well, they have the same. If you're self-employed and you get a wage, you have to pay in your social fees yourself. So therefore, you pay your own fee to the social insurance system. And when you need to be home with parental insurance, you apply to us and we will also pay out the payment to a self-employed person as well. So in Sweden, everyone is covered by this general insurance. So if you live or work in Sweden, you're covered. And if you live in Sweden, you're covered with the benefits, that's ground for that you live here, and the insurance is if you work here then. So that's the main I would say, how it works. And it's the same then for self-employed.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I have a follow-up question to Anna's question for Dr. Kim regarding the political stances of the approaches promoted by the Democratic Party and the Conservative Party in South Korea. Can we see a certain degree of divergences in priorities or in strategies for promotions of work-life balance policies, or there's somehow a certain convergence?
So you mean convergence after?
In terms of policy and approaches.
Oh. I'm sorry, can you elaborate on question?
Like, is, for instance, the Democratic Party closing the accent, closing the focus on more gender on policies based on gender equality, and on the other hand, the Conservative Party closing the focus more on tools accessible only to women, for instance, or something similar.
I see. Okay. Maybe the conservative government affect some change of women policies, but I'm working on the budget, so I usually check the change, change of budget between before and after the conservative government. But actually, okay, we have the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, and the ministry is responsible for women policies in Korea. So I think the easiest way to checking the budget change is to check up with the amount of budget for the ministry. But actually, the budget hasn't decreased during the government. So yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think there is any decrease in women policy.
I think there was one last question because our time is off. There in the back.
There is a quick follow-up.
Okay.
Yes, okay. I was thinking, since it is you pay to the insurance system if you're self-employed, but I was thinking, wouldn't it be kind of easy to cheat the system then by paying into it, saying that your kid is sick, and then keep on working and stuff like that? The income and the sick kids insurance.
Yeah, that's a high risk for us that they fraud the system like that. We have a possibility to do checkups on that too. We can ask the daycare center if the child was there or not. So that is one way. We can also, if we suspect that someone is cheating the system, we can also demand that they have a doctor certificate from the first day, if that is what we suspect. So that's one tool that we got. But of course, that is a high risk. So that's something that the system has some deficits. So, you know that the system was created in a time where on trust, you signed your application with honor and respect, and I assure that this is the case, and the society has changed a lot since then. You need to be able to do checkups more. So that is one actually bad thing about the system, that it's possible to cheat in that way.
Okay, thank you.
A question.
Yes.
Which I wanted to ask, this thing about all these checks and aren't these still, now maybe it's because I'm an optimist, but isn't this still marginal behavior? I mean, isn't this, I mean, talking about all these, okay, you don't have this person here, but aren't most people still, you say also, okay, on average, people take about 10 days of leave, 6 leave with kids for this one. This seems plausible, like absolutely reasonable and plausible. So wouldn't most people anyway have have this.
Like
yeah,
respect for the
this-
insurance. Yes.
And then, of course, on the margins, you have things going on and so on, but I mean, by and large.
Yeah, well,
there are still countries with large levels of trust, and where there is a kind of a social contract between the citizens and then the systems.
yes, I would say that most, if we see in the cases, most wrongfully payments are small, with small figures and the small errors and so on. But the people who systematically frauds the system makes the amount that are frauded in that way almost bigger than the small ones put together. So therefore, it's needed in this insurance to better ways to make control checkups in this. Sadly, it's that those who systematically does this, they use like 5 days a week with temporary parental benefit and work at the same time. So yes, so therefore we've also done this what we call smart controls with the data mining systems and so on, and try to, and these controls are more efficient than the random checkups and so on, but still they get a lot of money out of the system through this insurance. So therefore, there are more reforms coming, I guess, to reduce this. So.
Thank you. And now the last question there back. You were handling, yes.
Oh, yeah, only this time, yeah. This can be a simple yes or no question as well. And I suppose it's directed more, I guess, perhaps to the migration's counterpart, but I'd be really interested to hear your perspective on it. But given the social benefits in Sweden and the concerns over birth rates in South Korea, do you think that there should be a bit more of a policy drive for getting families who aren't native to those respective countries into those countries to kind of close that gap? That makes sense? Like, I'd be interested to know what percentage of people using social benefits aren't native to Sweden, for instance. If that's a tall metric.
Well, hard to answer, actually. The migration politics in Sweden it's a hot potato today, I guess. So different political parties thinking we should reduce or something that it should be more or so. For a political party today to enter politics saying that we should have a more generous migration policy in Sweden, it would be hard today, I guess. But of course, one way to solve or at least reduce the problem with low fertility rates is to have a migration. So, of course, but in real politics today, I think it's hard for the parties to even suggest that today, actually. And how much is paid out to foreign born in Sweden? I don't have that figure, actually. I don't know if you have some.
No. Okay, I think our time is up. So thank you very much for the presenters and for the very diligent audience for all these interesting and engaging questions. Thank you.